Welcome to OmegaMatters, where we talk all things omegas. I'm Kristina Jackson. This is Bill Harris, my dad. And today we are excited to bring in Dr. Rachel Gow. Dr. Gow is a child neuropsychologist specializing in ADHD and associated neurodivergent conditions. In the overall field of nutritional neuroscience, she holds a PhD in child neuropsychology from King's College in London and is a registered nutritionist, which is under the category of science. She's a lecturer at several universities in the UK and trained here at the NIH stateside with Dr. Joe Hiblin. She writes books and has created a nonprofit to help talk about this topic. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachel.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to talk with you both today.
Yes, this is the hot topic that we are asked about all the time. Kids, ADHD, omega-3s. So I'm always curious how you got into this field. What is your journey to get you to a place where you are so deeply involved in the research and the clinical side of this issue?
Sure. How long have we got? Do you want the short version?
I know. Sort of short, sort of detailed, you know?
Yeah. Journey. It's been a long journey. I started out really just as a mom with my firstborn son, who was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. And then, basically that completely transformed both of our lives. I knew something about dyslexia. I'd never really kind of heard much about ADHD back then. Now it's a household term, but it wasn't then. And so I felt I kind of had to start researching. Parents of children with neurodivergent conditions often become better researchers than FBI agents. We want to know everything and we want to know it now. And so that's what happened, really. And then I decided to enroll as a mature student. We can do that in the UK. So basically, off the back of life experience and age, I was granted entry. I didn't have the conventional kind of entry criteria, but we go down, sort of form an interview, all the rest of it. Anyway, I started a Bachelor of Science in Psychology that led to a Master's in Psychological Research Methods, which was really interesting because a lot of it was statistics, but also learning to critique other published research, like especially in terms of design and methodology and so on. And there's also really neat kind of philosophy side that I loved. Then I went on to, I was offered a PhD at King's College London at the Institute of Psychiatry in the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry under, at the time, one of the UK's leading authorities in ADHD research. And that was Professor Eric Taylor. He was head of child and adolescent psychiatry. So I was really privileged to be able to work with him. And I conducted a 4-year project in child neuropsychology, but obviously being trained also in psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry. And then I was invited to be a postdoctoral researcher in the section of nutritional neuroscience, where I spent 4 years. So it's a long journey. Yeah. And I'm actually just finished studying again. I just finished my PG CAP, which is like a higher education training qualification, which will enable me to just be that little bit more qualified in terms of lecturing and teaching university students. So, yeah.
Wow. And you are a registered nutritionist.
Yes.
So you got that degree too.
And the author, Smart Foods
and an
Ages.
author.
Yeah.
Oh, show that.
Thank
show
you.
that
Yes.
a little more clearly.
Show
right
that
in front
again.
of your face. Show us your book.
Smart Foods for ADHD. Is that what you said?
Smart Foods.
Oh, here's my book. Sorry. Smart Foods for ADHD and Brain Health.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Okay, great.
We should put that. We'll put that in our show notes.
40 years of knowledge. Well, but I wrote it after my PhD, so I felt like I needed to share that information. Yeah. So.
Great.
Yeah, because once you do your dissertation, and it goes into the annals of science.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily drip into the clinical practice or general popular culture.
Right.
So that's awesome that you
Right.
wrote a book about it. Yes. So I did not know you had such a personal connection to this. So that's really fascinating. And I'm curious, do you also work clinically with other kids? Is that part of where this study that you just published kind of came from?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I did for some time have a private clinic
Mhm.
where I would screen children for ADHD and other kind of neurodivergent conditions, and then depending on the outcome, work with a child and adolescent psychiatrist who would kind of handle the diagnostic evaluation part. So yeah, like a
Mhm.
team effort, or refer within my network to a wonderful clinical psychologist or an educational psychologist or whatever,
Mhm.
whatever came up. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Um, and so I guess with the study, if we want to just get into the study that you did, you just
Mm.
published a study in Frontiers. It's called A Closer Look at the Role of Nutrition in Children and Adults with ADHD and Neurodivergence. And can you tell us what the overall study rationale was, and then the methods, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, of course. I think first and foremost, you know, seeing families on a day-to-day basis for some time, I started to observe that upon having a blood draw, the individual, the child or the young person often presented with a number of nutritional insufficiencies as well as food intolerances. And then having a kind of a thorough look at their food diaries, I noticed really interesting relationships that these children were eating the very foods that they were intolerant to. And the main
Mhm.
culprits were, cow's milk, where they'd be
Mhm.
guzzling dairy, or wheat, gluten. And I kind of like started looking into these, what I felt were symbiotic relationships. So, for
Mhm.
example, tests came up that they were intolerant to cow's milk, yet they're craving cow's milk and
Huh.
drinking it by the pints. And I felt that, without obviously knowing, this child was potentially kind of feeding the kind of dysbiotic pathogenic gut microbiome,
Mhm.
facilitating its growth to the point where it's potentially over colonizing, the gut
Mhm.
microbiome and potentially increasing risk for, more serious conditions like leaky gut syndrome or gut dysbiosis, same thing, inflammation of the gut essentially. So yeah,
Mhm.
and then I decided that this really needed to be put together because obviously observational data is really interesting, but you need several case studies. And in my case, there was about 80 families. So first of
Mhm.
all, I was a guest lecturer at the University of Roehampton. A dear friend of mine, Dr. Simon Dial, who's a world-renowned
Mhm.
researcher in omega-3 fatty acids. I wrote to him and I was kind of telling him about some of my preliminary observations and would he be interested in putting this together, this data set together as a clinical project for some of his master's students. So I was invited to collaborate and I ended up supervising 4 master's students in clinical nutrition. We put together
Mhm.
all the families, obviously going back a step or two, each family would go and visit a clinic in W1 where they'd have a blood draw by a qualified phlebotomist, or they'd have a home visit by a phlebotomist. And then the data was obviously analysed after that. So we put all the data together. Some of the families obviously didn't consent. We'd lost touch with some of them. But it was, quite a sizable amount of data as a healthy starting point, because obviously we aim to build on this database and also collect data from non-diagnosed kind of controls. So that was really the start of it all.
Did you have this paper that's coming out in Frontiers? Um, why don't you tell us about that before I ask you more questions about it?
Yeah, of course. Many parents or carers of neurodivergent children also have the challenge of that child being a fussy eater or a picky eater. This is quite common as well. It's spoken about quite a bit. or should we just pause because my coffee machine is running? I don't know, just switch itself on magically.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm also,
yeah.
I was going to say my light, and we are a new building, and it turns off when I don't move enough. So if it goes black a few times,
You're just sitting there rocking.
I'm just going to like wave.
Yeah,
Okay.
motion. Yeah. So children with ADHD and other neurodivergent conditions tend to be kind of picky eaters, fussy eaters. They also have an increased risk of developing disordered eating or problematic eating. Some common disorders include avoidant and restrictive eating patterns, ARFID-like traits. They're very common to children with both ADHD and also autism spectrum disorders. There's food neophobia, which is a reluctance or outright refusal to try new foods. And it's estimated that around 20% of children with ADHD develop some type of eating disorder, although there's other research that suggests it's actually quite a bit higher, up to sort of 37%. We also know that like OCD is associated with orthorexia nervosa. And there is this kind of frequent pattern of kind of high levels of food selectivity, avoidance of entire food groups, strong preferences for certain foods, lots of sensory aversions to taste, textures. It's not uncommon for a young person with ADHD or ASD, for example, not to eat fruits and vegetables until their mid-20s to even early 30s.
Oh.
Wow. I think it's so...
Gosh.
I did not know that it went on until then. And fruits and vegetables as very large food groups to avoid that. What you said about them seeking out like dairy, and that also like it's as if like the gut biome's not able to absorb when it's that. It's interesting. I've never heard that they actively are seeking out this food that is also inflaming their guts, but they're not actually getting what they need from it, it sounds like. And is the same thing happening with grains, essentially? And then milk has so many nutrients, and magnesium was one of the main ones you found a lot of relationships with in this paper. So that's... And do oftentimes they eliminate these foods and that helps with symptoms or not? Is that...
Yeah, it's really hard to eliminate foods,
hard to tell,
especially in children who are such fussy eaters. I mean, the research has shown that children with ASD frequently consume, fewer vegetables, fruits, and high fiber foods, which obviously is needed for the gut, and instead rely heavily on the kind of, ultra processed foods, refined carbohydrates. That there's a lot of research demonstrating that. So we knew this already. This is not new knowledge. It's very common knowledge that children with neurodivergent related conditions are at risk of nutritional insufficiencies. And I'm particularly interested in how that influences brain activity and function, and especially mood as well, because we know that certain nutrients are absolutely critical to regulate our serotonergic and dopaminergic systems of the brain. And we see a lot of dysregulated behaviors in these children as well. And it is a real struggle because, there's been lots of research in the field of nutritional psychiatry showing, lack of antioxidants. I mean, I found that in some of our findings, which we'll come to, but polyphenols, lower fiber, magnesium, folate, these are commonly in food sources that are rejected by neurodivergent children due to their sort of complex textures and bitter taste and all of that, as I said, contributes unknowingly to micronutrient insufficiencies, which obviously impacts their behavior as well.
So can we bring it around to Omega? That's our interest here, primarily.
Yes.
So this paper, you looked at 47 kids, 57 people altogether, and you measured blood levels of a variety of nutrients, including omega-3. And what'd you find?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really, really interesting. Approximately 63% of the full sample presented with suboptimal omega-3 index scores. And for those that don't know, the omega-3 index is the sum of EPA and DHA, the two key highly unsaturated fatty acids that we need for optimal brain function. And yes, we actually did use the Omega Quant as well, because it's, comprehensive and provides an excellent detailed overview of not just omega-3 fatty acids, but so much more than that as well. So it's fascinating. But yes, the mean omega-3 index was 4, which is very, very low. And we know through the work of other research groups in England, like the DOLAB study, and Dr. Alex Richardson and others, that have found a mean omega-3 index in UK school children as 2.4. So very, very low. I mean, increasingly, the omega-3 index is being used in nutritional psychiatry research because it gives us an indicator. And it's also very interesting to correlate that with kind of psychiatric or psychological symptoms to look at some of these relationships. And I have always used it. So when I was at the NIH, we measured the omega-3 index in the group of adults with ADHD. That took part in our NORA study. And that was the neuroimaging omega-3 and reward in adults with ADHD. It was the world's first randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial to look at omega-3 versus a placebo in the brain activity of adults with ADHD using neuroimaging techniques. It was a 16-week RCT that unfortunately never got published, but should have done. And yeah, we found an omega-3 index of 4.2 in those adults with ADHD.
Well, why did they give up? I mean, that's always. I'm sure the general public would say, "Well, you did this study. Why didn't you publish it?"
I've been trying for 10 years, so maybe we'll talk about it off screen.
Yeah.
It got blocked.
More there.
Not dead yet.
Kept getting blocked. Yeah, shame, but I tried.
Yeah,
I've been talking about it, and I kind of I discussed it in presentations, and I talk about what I can, and some of it has kind of been semi-published, but shame. And I'm going to try and go back to that if I can.
Yeah. Well, we're very interested in trying to figure out how we can define a healthy target omega-3 index for kids, and what data set we would use how would we define normal, healthy kids? And if you can find those kids, can you get blood samples from them and then use their omega-3 level as a theoretical target for health? Can you think about that? For what would you think?
Yeah, I mean,
in your paper, I think you defined, healthy using our standard, under 4%, over 8%. Those were originally set up for adults, because we didn't have data in kids. And that's kind of a challenge we're facing now, is people want to know, well, are those the right numbers for adults, or should I aim for something else in a kid? And I'm just curious what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really relevant and important point. And you're right. It's a scale for adults, but increasingly it's being applied in research with children. So yes, I do think that will need to be adjusted accordingly. But saying that, we still know that children eat very little fish, oily fish and seafood. I mean, I take diary, so I get to see it firsthand, as well as the blood. And I mean, also there's no real general consensus. I mean, there are recommendations by authorities like GOED and ISFAL, as you know, for 250 milligrams as the kind of average amount that a child should be consuming, and government recommendations of 1 to 2 portions of oily fish and seafood. But I do feel that we need firmer recommendations, given the brain is the fattiest organ in the human body, and the DHA plays a critical role in, cell signaling across neuronal networks, kind of making for faster and more efficient communication. And of course, the other roles that these brain essential fats play as well.
Yeah.
In trying to,
I mean, it does kind of strike. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, in trying to link ADHD with low omega-3, it kind of becomes a chicken and an egg thing, it seems like. If you know they're not eating, they don't eat omega-3, which is why their blood levels are low, but we really don't know that's in part of the causal pathway, or is it just a result of having ADHD, that you don't eat fish and you have low levels? How can we make a causal connection there?
Yeah, that's right, because it's way more complex than that. And obviously the biochemical pathway in terms of the conversion from alpha-linoleic acid into EPA and DHA is highly problematic and mediated by a multitude of factors, including things like, whether the child is male or female, their background diet, their genetic activity as well, the delta 5 and delta 6 desaturase enzyme activity, which can potentially be impaired. It's been found to be potentially impaired, but that again needs more research and closer attention. I wanted to do that type of research as a PhD student. I wanted to look at sort of stable isotope and map and trace the absorption, but it was costly. We'd run out of time and money, and nutritional research is not easy. And I think what's really difficult is a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists come into the field without the biochemistry training, without the nutritional training, jumping on the bandwagon, like, I'll conduct an RCT and then they don't kind of do things like measure the baseline level of that child's omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acid levels before they supplement. They don't kind of make adjustments in the dose. They don't particularly even look at the formula. They don't understand oftentimes the difference between omega-3 and 6 fatty acids. I mean, I've looked at Cochrane reviews where they've just chucked everything in it, garbage in, garbage out. And they adopt researchers with no biochemistry training to be the lead author and write this up. And nutrition research, as I mentioned, is not easy, far from it. And also, I think a key thing is nutrients don't work in isolation. They work in synergy. So when you eat a piece of fish, you don't just get the omegas, but you get the multivitamin, you get the iron, the magnesium, the selenium, the zinc, and all of these work together to facilitate absorption into the red blood cells. So oftentimes people are just taking their 1 gram of fish oil every day and they're not changing their background diet. Like, I was taught at NIH by William Lands, you have to literally elevate the omega-3s and simultaneously, decrease, he used to say nix the 6, reduce the omega-6s. But yeah, it's not easy.
It's not easy, right?
Have you seen, there's an older paper, and I'm not sure the author, but they were looking at kind of they did blood levels of, they had normal controls, ADHD and autism spectrum. And they did find low DHA and also low arachidonic, the omega-6.
Yeah.
So it was just like across the board, low essential fatty acids. So that kind of like what's going on with that with the omega-6 side and the omega-3 side, when decreases in both seem to indicate not enough of these fats for these kids, or something's going on with their metabolism. What do you think about that in context with what you saw here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, obviously, both omega-3 and the 6 are essential polyunsaturated fatty acids. And there's a lot of the vilification of omega-6, I think mainly due to a lack of education, potentially. We obviously need omega-6. It's brain essential. Obviously, we have to be careful with the amount we consume through ultra-processed foods, for example, because it's the processing of oils containing omega-6 and the refining hydrogenation that may be potentially, linked to harms. Whereas if you're having something that's unrefined, it's virgin, you know, it's going to be a lot, I hate the word cleaner, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You don't want to use that word anymore, but
Right.
yeah, so obviously omega-6s alert us to injury. If I cut myself, that wound's going to become inflamed. You know, it's going to be like, hey, I need to treat this wound. But if the wound is still red, raw, and inflamed 3 months later, I'm in trouble, you know. And I think that's a very simplistic
not
way
good.
to do it. But yeah, obviously, there's a link to information. Instagram's gone crazy over this. You know, you see it all the time, don't you? And I think that we do need to be careful with a lot of the misinformation, and nutritional education is absolutely critical. That's why I love the fact that you guys have this podcast. You know, your dad is, you know, one of the top researchers out there in this field, and I'm sure you're doing an amazing job of re-educating everyone.
Oh, stop.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's
what do I think? Yeah, what do I think?
Yeah.
I think we need to be taking closer looks. I think it's a very complex picture. It's not as well understood as we think or we'd like to think. It's not always clear cut. And yeah, basically, I think this field is expanding rapidly, which is wonderful. You know, given when I first started out, nutritional psychiatry wasn't as big as it is now. It's growing, and there's more research, investment.
Right.
You know, I had to come to America to get funding to do the research that I wanted.
Oh,
wow. You know, nutritional research is not well funded at all in the UK. Yeah.
Do you recommend for parents who've got kids with ADHD to give them supplements, omega-3 supplements?
Well, my motto is there's always foods first. So it's basically you have to adjust the diet. And I think it's really frustrating because oftentimes nutrition is addressed from the neck down in terms of its preventative role in the premature development of metabolic health disease, you know, type 2 diabetes, obesity, stroke, cardiovascular disease, so on. And the role of nutrition in the activity and function of the human brain is not well understood, and especially by those who are in privileged positions of power to make changes, like our GPs, our family practitioners. You know, if someone turns up at the GP surgery and is like, you know, I feel I've got low energy, I'm fatigued, I have anxiety, I'm tearful, you know, they're not going to say, what do you eat? You know, that question seldom or never features in any preliminary screening, like mental health, I call it brain health, but yeah, it doesn't. Yet, you know, we're not at the stage where we're recommending simple tests like the omega-3 index tests, you know, things that we can do at home for ourselves, giving the patient kind of authority, or treating them as agents of change over their own lives. You know, we need to give some of the power back to the patient, allow the patient to have a voice. And we need to say, well, you know what, there's things you could do at home. You know, have you tried testing your omega-3 index? You know, and then, this is what the omega-3 index is, or, you know, and giving them that critical, potentially life-saving information, as opposed to like, okay, you're tired, you've got low mood, you're tearful. Okay, let me get my prescription pad out. And now I'm going to write you a prescription for some type of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And you're going to come back in 6 months and we'll adjust the dose accordingly. You know, brain health is so much more than that. And that's what I want to see in my lifetime, that change.
Yeah, we agree.
And especially in kids, and many parents don't want to jump to the medicine. They want to try everything else that they possibly can first. And it's interesting, like we have the same kind of issues here in the States around nutrition. It's too big for the general practice docs to get into. But that would be an amazing place for registered dietitians or nutritionists to have a bigger role. And if, along with being able for us, we think, to test this nutrient, it's one nutrient, like you said, of many, but it is one of the key critical ones, we think, that is fairly deficient. I mean, what I also have I noticed in this paper with this population, it didn't seem like to me this, it seems like a lot of kids, I bet the overall rate of omega-3 deficiency by this standard is probably 50-60% of kids in the US, it seems like. We often see kids have lower levels of omega-3s compared to adults in general. So that's part of where we're trying to assess whether 8% is appropriate for kids. They certainly can get to 8%, typically takes supplementation. But there are also lots of more functional foods now, different kinds of emulsions and ways. Like, do you at all think that there's a use for that, like hiding the vegetables or hiding the omega-3s in something that they're already a little bit more palatable, like they're more likely to have something that's it's more processed, probably a sugar, but you're also kind of trying to dose them up and maybe start to take care of some of those symptoms to start to address trying to eat a more balanced diet. There's a lot there.
I love the fact that you're making America healthy again. I mean,
we'll see.
I love the fact that
we were doing that before the last election.
I love the fact that there's some cleaning up going on. Is that word again?
A focus.
You know what I mean? Like in terms of some of the food dyes that are already outright banned in England and Europe that have been going on and have been, and especially children are the most vulnerable. You know, children are arguably rewarded with ultra processed foods for, you know, exam marks, your behavior. You know, let me shove you some more, you know. And it's really hard because we're all indoctrinated it's part of our society. You know, a lot of these food non-nutritive compounds, food stuffs, if you like, are basically not the diet of our ancestors. They're not how we used to eat. And I really would like us to kind of go back to basics. And I know it's hard. I know it's tough. I've been a single mom myself and it's really hard, but get back in the kitchen, try and, you know, select your ingredients yourself, try and where you can, you know, prepare and make your own meals. And I know it takes a bit longer time to get up earlier and stuff like that. I know it's not easy, but I just think it's so important because we become too reliant on some of these supermarket foods. And, you know, oftentimes parents are not checking labels or overlooking labels. And a lot of these dietary emulsifiers, there's emerging research now showing they're kind of acting like laundry detergents in our guts. You know, they're stripping away the healthy gut microbes. So we've got to be careful. And I think, I mean, in my research, just going back into the children's group only, we found as I mentioned, children presented with nutrient values below recommended ranges, and that was in vitamin D. And we know that in many, many research trials that vitamin D has a moderately favorable antidepressant effect. So it helps reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety, and we all need vitamin D. And in England, 65% is estimated of the UK population of vitamin D deficient because we spend much of our time under dark grey rain clouds with very little direct skin exposure to sunlight. So that's a problem. And then also iodine. So 53% of the group had insufficient iodine levels, which we know directly impacts brain function. Zinc, 71% of the group had lower than recommended values. Also vitamin E, alpha carotene, so the antioxidant alpha carotene, they were all below the recommended range, as well as the omega-3 index, which I've already mentioned. And none of the children had optimal, obviously it was for adults, but optimal values. And as I said, the mean score was, I think, around 4. So there's stuff going on here. And obviously it was a small group and it is only preliminary and we're not making any big claims or grand gestures about this research, but it is important and I hope it will inspire other researchers in the field of nutritional psychiatry to take a closer look at the role of nutrition in ADHD and other neurodivergent conditions. And we also found these really interesting relationships between the children's nutrient levels and their ADHD symptoms. So we're forgetting about that. I need to mention that. So like magnesium was moderately negatively correlated with ADHD, the total ADHD index scores as well. We found also the magnesium, again, was related to children's behavior. So the lower the magnesium, the higher the disruptive behavior scores. And omega-3 was also negatively related to learning and language scores. So the lower the omega-3, the higher the learning and language difficulties. And obviously these were all in children. So, you know, the relationships between food and the health of the human brain certainly deserves much greater investment, and research funds must be allocated to you know, this study.
Well, that is a great message, I think, maybe to end on, because that's the message we'd like to get out to. There's certainly
fine.
We could talk a lot, I think, about this, but that brings it back to really what needs to be done. We need more research to understand the role of nutrition in children's mental development, everybody's mental health, children's right now mental development, kids.
And I think, can I just say, I was just going to end on something. Yeah. I just want to end just by saying, for me and for many, many others in this field, you know, the future of brain health and well-being requires a whole person, holistic, intuitive, and personalized model or approach. So like you've got the nutritional biochemistry, which is your lifestyle, your behavior, which are your beliefs and your habits, the psychological, your thoughts, your emotion, your cognition, the physiological factors, the interconnected biological systems. These are all key contributing factors to brain health wellness, and also for building brain health resilience in a protective way against the premature development of disease.
Very good. Very good.
This is great. Keep up your work in this field. And we're looking forward to seeing what else you come out with and to checking out your book. And thank you so much for coming to talk with us today.
My absolute pleasure. It was a joy. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely
to see you again. All the best.
Thanks, Rachel.
Okay.